why Wyoming is such a special place, because we have people who care all the things that I've said. It's about community, it's about family, it's about the essentials of making this state go. And again, thank you very much for all that you do for the state.
And now, to introduce the governor, as if he needs an introduction anyway, please welcome Dick Garland.
Your microphone.
It's all green.
Oh, Joshua, you got me. I thought I was going to get preempted for.
No.
That'd be good.
I would never preempt you.
It's all good. Good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here to support the association today and discuss Rocky Mountain Power. Governor Gordon once described Wyoming's legacy of prudence and stewardship as, times like these remind us of the essential underpinning of American prosperity. Strong friendships, strong families, strong economies, strong communities that care about kids, grandkids, and the promise of opportunity of the future. We believe in that too at Rocky Mountain Power. We are proud to employ 1,000 people across the state of Wyoming. We are proud to serve over 150,000 companies or customers in this state, companies and residential customers. And we are proud through our community foundation, which is driven by our employees and their generosity, to have donated over $3.7 million to communities this year. For everything from STEM in schools to arts projects. So we live here, we're a part of the community, we're proud to be here. And I really am appreciative of Governor Gordon's leadership in the energy space. He's one of the pivotal leaders in energy. And he's had a strong commitment to the best of the above strategy for energy, which is what we need as a utility company. It's what we need as a state, and I believe what we need as a nation to be able to power what gives us our quality of life and drives our economic growth, which is reliable, consistent, affordable energy. And without his leadership to make sure that all the things that we need to provide that service are in play and available, it'd be a lot harder. A hard job would be a lot harder. So we're very appreciative of his leadership. So with that, I am very honored and pleased to introduce the 33rd Governor of the state of Wyoming, Mark Gordon.
Those were very kind words. Josh, thank you so much and welcome. It's wonderful to meet you, and it's great to be here again at the Press Association. I have to start, they always sit me next to Rob Hicks. And I had a couple of things I wanted to say about that for Rob. One of the legacies of being the only governor elected from Johnson County is that the only other governor from Johnson County is the guy who started the Buffalo Bulletin, Frank Lucas. Now, Rob, there you are. I'm just going to say that Nellie Taylor Ross wiped the floor with Frank Lucas. So I don't know what that means for us, but you and Jen, your friendship has been so important. I always, just so you know, when Rob calls, it's always, gosh, Rob, it's good to hear from you, and then I hold the phone a little bit away. As he explains, which is something that we've taken to heart, that it is really important that we support our press in the state. And that means making sure that when the state issues press releases, we try to, and because I'm just taking your messages to heart, that we make sure that we take advantage of the talent that is really quite clear here in this room. And I think you heard from all the award winners about how talented this corps is. To the journalism students, thank you for being here. Thank you for the courage to step up to perhaps one of the most challenging professions that one can have, probably also one of the most rewarding. But I would also say this is a particularly difficult time, particularly for local press. and could not be more important. When we have like Senator Dockstetter, who's willing to go all across the state to cover the little sporting events and make sure that every town is represented, you realize the kind of commitment it has and why Wyoming is such a special place, because we have people who care all the things that I've said. It's about community, it's about family, it's about the essentials of making this state go. And again, thank you very much for all that you do for the state. I thought I'd just make a couple of comments, and then I know you have questions, and I always, worry about what those are going to be, but that's always kind of the fun of it. What I wanted to sort of start out, just sort of set the stage a bit for the budget, and I see my friend Treasurer Meyer back there. The treasurer and I have been talking about this legacy that Wyoming has had for a long time of recognizing, particularly if you were here in the 80s or the 60s, the 70s, and the 90s, you knew that Wyoming had a pretty hard go of it. You may remember that in 1999, if it weren't for a Walton heir passing away, the state would have had a very hard time balancing its budgets. And I think it was about $80. Kurt, you can correct me. I think $80 is what Minnie Mitchell came to Stan Hathaway and said, that's what we've got in our account for the state. And so we've been very lean times in the past. And I think if you look at the progression over time of the kinds of consistent, conservative, save for the future, these are better times, let's set some aside. We've got to worry about the bad times that come, and you really look at that progression from, I'm going to start with Stan Smith, but I think you can move through to Cynthia Lummis, Joe Meyer. Certainly I had a hand in it, and I just want to give a recognition to Treasurer Meyer, who this year, $913 million, the second or first most important source of revenue for the state, for the general fund. And that's what the kinds of consistent conservative leadership, the kinds of things that people in Wyoming grew up doing and knowing. Sometimes the weather isn't all that good, so you want to make sure you have good supplies in place. And that's the legacy that Wyoming has. Jake talked a little bit about energy, and again, you look at what the legacy of Wyoming has been over multiple generations, really understanding the importance of being able to make sure that our Wyoming departments, our Wyoming agencies, were able to run interference with the federal government when there were difficult times. You've heard, I've heard, and I bet you have too, over and over, there's times when we can do a little bit better, but boy, it is so nice to be able to work with the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, or the Game and Fish. And there's some frustrations, I get that, but at least you can go see that person and talk to that person, and that's something that Wyoming has really, really emphasized. It's funny to me to hear from time to time now, since you realize that really since 2000, when we had that huge issue, and John Heinz, one of the most conservative senators we ever had, said, well, I guess I might have to be the one to talk about raising taxes. And then luckily along came coal bed methane, and we really haven't looked back. 2008, we managed 2016, biggest drop in revenue. We managed through that. Then there was that wonderful period of time that we all hope to forget, the time of COVID. But we were able to manage through that. People have not felt the same kinds of angst that they felt before. And believe me, if you were here in 1980, when my former boss at Apache Corporation said, I wish we had known what Ronald Reagan was doing, reducing the speed limit to 55 miles an hour. It would have been much easier for us to take the hits that we did in the energy industry if we understood it was about breaking the back of the Soviet Union. So You look at where we are and the fact that we've had pretty good times over the last 26 years. We've been able to continue to move. From the time that we started talking about statehood, we've been talking about economic diversification. We've been talking about how we can become more than a one commodity or two commodity economy, how we need to be able to grow and expand our communities. This is a long time conversation in Wyoming. And you realize that over the last few years, with the work that you all have done, with the work the legislature has done, and most especially entrepreneurs in the state, we have begun to move the needle. I see Dustin there, and I know, Dustin, we've talked a lot about how Texas and Wyoming in the 1970s were about 80% natural resource economies. Texas is about 25%. We've moved it a little bit, but we're still upwards of 70%. We're still working on that. Some really exciting things have happened. We just issued the Wyoming Stable Token. Not really sure exactly where all of that's going to go, but about 1.5 million already there. You now have banks and credit unions that are saying this is kind of an opportunity for us to be able to go up against some of the biggest institutions and be able to make sure that Wyoming banks, Wyoming chartered banks, have more of a chance to be able to compete in a new economy. You look at what we've been able to do with manufacturing, the fact that a few years ago, nuclear power was moribund. The first new design of a nuclear plant has been built in Kemmerer. And it's my understanding that they're really looking at multiples of that type of reactor, and the training will be in Wyoming. So I think if you look across the spectrum on all of the fronts, from financial to manufacturing to all of these things, Wyoming has pivoted in a remarkable way. And I want to take just a second to talk a little bit about education. There are a number of national conversations that we have about school choice, vouchers, and so on. All of those things Wyoming is dealing with. But beyond that sort of high level of conversation, there's also a remarkable thing going on in Wyoming. For the first time in a long time, we've been able to align the Board of Education, the Department of Education, and the Governor's Office really from the bottom to the top in saying, okay, how do we make sure that our K-12 education system is not only novel, but responsive to communities, parents, and the industries that hope to be able to build and locate in Wyoming. All of this has been about how do we make sure kids are engaged, how are they learning better, and what are the ways that we can engage both teachers, students, and I guess also parents and industry leaders in really engaging in that whole education process. There's some remarkable stories that we can talk about, but I won't give the examples here. I'm flabbergasted by the range of options that are happening. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's based in the community, and it's incredible. Then you look at the Wyoming Innovation Partnership and the fact that we grew a program here, and now we've passed it off to the private sector to keep it going. If there's ever anybody who's going to make sure that we continue to push for the education that we hope we see in CTE and other aspects of that, it's going to be the people who are going to benefit from it, and they're the ones that are funding it now. So that's kind of remarkable. And I think if you look then also at the alignment between the university and what we're doing with our community colleges, you realize that the range of things that happen at our community colleges and in our education system to our university in Wyoming, I don't know any other place in the country where and your job is going to change. I mean, look, this room is filled with people who now are dealing with a lot more technology than you ever did before. Who knows what we're going to do with AI? And for a guy in ag, I gotta tell you, that meant something different to me a few years ago. But that's why all this stuff is changing so much. And so we need to be able to have a responsive education system that can meet people as they need it. Plus then all of our high school students that are able to take that dual and concurrent education opportunity to be able to, and this is as good as any scholarship that we can do. If you can get a year or a year and a half of your education out of the way before you've even got to college, wow. Wyoming is doing some really amazing things, and we're being responsive to the industry that's growing. Now, can we do more? Absolutely. We have to keep, and that's that legacy thing I keep talking about. Wyoming has always been, this community here has always been about how can we be better? How can we be stronger? How can we diversify our economy? How can we make sure that we do a better job? And let me say that core industry that built Casper, the core industry that built Gillette, Dick knows this because I yell at him all the time. How do we make sure we can use more coal? What can we do to get natural gas happening? How can we make all of these things come true? And we're in a sweet spot now with the advent of data centers. How can we make all of these things come true? And we're in a sweet spot now with the advent of data centers. Worried about water, but we're making sure that we don't use water for cooling systems. We have an opportunity now that is extraordinary. And if you look at our forebears, they were not saying, oh my gosh, there's a cliff we're gonna fall off. They were saying, we've got to go for broke now. This is the time to make hay. And that's really where Wyoming is. So I wanted to say all of that because I know you have a lot of questions. And just thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do. And I give Rob a lot of grief, but Rob is a dear friend. And Rob, your courage at stepping up and picking up so many papers is something we should all celebrate. I'm all ready for your questions, and I got a nice podium I can hide on.
Governor,
Yeah.
you brought up education. Have you seen any modeling on what taking $40 million out of the UW will do?
Mark, I haven't seen any sort of solid modeling yet. I think it's not I don't think I need to look at a spreadsheet to say that's cutting the guts out of our university. I worry tremendous. I mean, this is an issue that the people of Wyoming really should be discussing. Are we a D1 school or are we not? That's the sports aspect of it. You know, do we still tailgate the same way we do? Do we still carry that as much as we do? But then you look at it, and we set up the Ag Initiative really to say we need to celebrate and talk about agriculture because it's an important part of our economy. But we have energy, we have tourism, we have all of these other things, water, and other aspects of this that we really need to emphasize. And to take that away from our university at the very time that it is becoming the research institution that most states have and look to for economic development, it's just not good thinking. And it will be devastating to the university.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes?
Governor Billy Emil from the News and Guide. I'm just following up on that question. There's also a pretty substantial cut to Wyoming public media proposed by the Appropriations Committee. I'm curious, just thinking about the partners on the airwaves, if you support that cut or if you're opposed to it.
I remember what a struggle it was just to get repeaters around the state. And, we used to be able to pick up NPR right close to to Laramie, and then it was sort of exciting to see it expand, even when the state was in kind of financial struggles. PBS, I'll tell you a funny story. It's a little bit off point, but just to tell you how important it is to the state. Randall Luthi, when he was first in the House, was going to look at what can we cut? You know, is it constitutional? Was it necessary? Let's cut some things. And so the first thing he thought he could cut was PBS, Wyoming PBS. So he went to then Speaker Eli Bebop and said, Mr. Speaker, I want to cut Wyoming PBS. And of course, Eli's sister, Ruby, ran Wyoming PBS. It was a short conversation. but I think actually if you really look at the value, particularly in this, our 250th year, there's no one else that is taking a look at our communities and our history and able to present the kinds of programming that Wyoming PBS does. I think it's incredibly short-sighted to say, we're going to get rid of this. Can we figure out ways to make it leaner? Perhaps. Have people in Wyoming stood up to support it? Absolutely. But again, these are the sort of national sort of touch points that kind of fuel a special kind of I don't know exactly what you call it, but a special kind of fervor to get rid of PBS. And our PBS, the debates that they are able to host and other things, it's just, to me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't support it.
Governor?
Yes.
The school districts in Bighorn County are collectively panicking over the recalibration model for small school districts and education. Is there a way out of that? How do you feel about that? What's going to happen next?
You know, that, as you know, is all in the legislature's bailiwick, and my concern with all of the adjustments I've said this, and I'm getting to your question, but my concern with all the adjustments we've made in sort of, you know, charter schools and this and that is we haven't done it necessarily with care to sort of say, okay, now that we've done this, how are we going to fund it? And let me give you an example. I've heard one proponent say we need to have a charter school in every school district. Now, I don't have any problem with charter schools. I do hope that we're able to fund them, but you've just doubled the size of government. So you now would have potentially 8 districts unless we figure out a way to handle that piece of the equation. And to me, that's one of the things that the legislature really needs to get right. They need to understand what the consequences of these decisions are and be able to weigh carefully how they're going to fund them. And it's not just today, it's not just this biennium, it's going forward. It's the issue that we've been dealing with for some time. I can't speak to the lawsuits and all of that go on, but I'm really hopeful that the legislature takes seriously this responsibility and finds a way to be able to fund our schools. And frankly, it's all of our schools that they have to do. And your 4 districts, a key element. Now there has been, as you know, that conversation about how do we shrink them. Again, these are things that, you know, Bighorn went through that already, and there were some serious conversations about that. So just doing that from on high, I think, is probably not wise. We'll weigh in as we can and be as thoughtful as we can in that. But it's a challenge. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Governor. Jasmine from the Jackson Hole News and Guide. It's election season. We've seen many announcements, most recently from Jillian Balow and Megan Degenfelder. What public office do you plan to run for in 2026?
Jasmine, thank you, and you'll be the first to know. I have to say, you know, while everybody else is thinking about running for election and how to do that, we have a budget, We have a serious budget. We have a legislature has weighed in, I think, on one vision of Wyoming. And I think it's very important to be thoughtful. And let me say, not a legislature, a joint appropriations committee. But that's the job I have. That's what I was elected to do. And I'm not, when I always tell this story. So Dad told me to go water the chickens. And so I spent the entire morning figuring out a way I didn't have to carry the pails of water over to the chickens. And at noon, he said, "So, did you get the chickens watered?" And I said, "I got this really cool thing, Dad." And he said, "But I told you, go water the chickens." And I think I've got that job. Make sure that we get through this budget session. Thank you. And you knew him. Other questions? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
For focusing on watering the chickens, this upcoming session, yes, it's about the budget, but you've also encouraged some legislative action outside of the budget with the most recent Supreme Court decision on abortion.
Mhm.
How do we make sure we get through that conversation while still maintaining the constitutional authority of our court system, which is very much under attack in that conversation?
Well, you'll know one of my first comments on this was that I think the court weighed in before the session. I think that's good. It gives the legislature the opportunity to really address the issue that they laid out before them, and I hope the legislature does that. I think the taking aim at the court system is a rabbit trail, and to me, I think that is a mistake. And if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think the terribly unfortunate conversation would be, do we go to elected judges? Because if we go to elected judges, then if anybody, I'm not an attorney, but if you're going to show up in anybody's courtroom with an elected judge, you better have given to that judge, and in some sort of way. And I think we have a judicial system right now that is probably I know it's the envy of so many people around the country, that I hope we don't screw up what we already get pretty much right. I had a friend who told me, I think and this is actually, that all originated in Buffalo with a hill, actually Drake Hill's grandfather, something like that. That constitutional amendment started there. And the point that was made to me was, it's about as perfect a system as we can imagine. It's got one flaw, you. So, and I subscribe to that. I do think if you look at what our Constitution says, we have 3 branches of government. The Constitution's a bit vague about how these duties overlap, but when we break the system, when we don't have a virtuous and independent judiciary, which is exactly what Andrew Jackson talked about as being so important, we lose much more than we gain. So I hope we focus on fixing the issue that the Supreme Court laid out before us, and not sort of breaking the entire system just because we're angry. So, thank you. Dustin, oh boy, here I'm hiding behind this.
Dustin Blyzepper with Wyoming. Governor, you mentioned that now's the time for Wyoming to make hay, and we just saw this week the JAC committee is ready to make hay, but maybe in the form of major budget cuts. What do budget cuts, what deep budget cuts mean for expanding Wyoming's economy, which seems to be on the precipice of expanding into nuclear, all sorts of new energy forms. And are you worried about what these budgeting decisions might mean about retaining and attracting young professionals? There are a lot of young professionals in this room today.
Yeah, Dustin, thanks so much for that. And You know, there are two things I learned as a kid on the ranch. One was when your dad says, you're 7 years old, go out and move those 300 head of cows into the next pasture. You get started, and sometimes it works, and sometimes the cows run back over the top of you. And, you know, you can't just sort of say, Dad, I couldn't do it. You get started again and you go. We've got a long session ahead. And the other thing I learned is if you're ever going to start a horse, you better have more time than they do. And I have a lot of time. And so it is so important right now. You know, I don't want to say anything ill of anyone, but I am concerned that this sort of conversation about a fiscal cliff arriving, that can be a dream come true if you decide you're going to make it happen that way. You know, if you say, well, we're going to cut all of our efforts because we can't afford them, when clearly leaving, you know, nearly 500 million in sort of slack that the legislature could put elsewhere. And we can have good conversations about whether this is important or that is not. But to sort of paint the devil on the wall and say, we're facing a fiscal cliff, so we're not going to do anything about it is just wrong-headed and not Wyoming. I think what you point out is if we aren't talking about a future of growth on Wyoming terms, a future of diversification, and a future where young professionals can find a reason to stay here, we're going to create the very cliff that they say is out there. As I look at it, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but as I look at it, we've got, who knows how big it's going to be, but we've got data centers that are coming that are going to use, Dick and I were just talking about this, they want to use energy. What do we have? Bunches of energy.
Gordo and Gray all the way. I think it would be an epic. It's what Chuck's been picking the fight with him forever. Mark has responded a couple of times this year and gotten hot under the collar. Says he wasn't hot under the collar. I can believe it this last time that he maybe thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and ask him to step outside because it's what a Wyoming guy would do. I actually think it was a good play by him. I think he follows it up right now and says, hey, you know what? I think me and Chuck Gray ought to settle this like men. And so I'm going to run for the U.S. House seat.
Let's settle it on the ballot instead of the ring.
Yeah, and God bless Jenny Gordon. And I know that's a burden on families and everything if he does win. You know, Chuck Gray is full speed ahead on it, but I want to see it, man. I want to see Gray Gordon. And I think, you know, we'll close on that, Alexis. Let's see it. Give the people the grudge match that they've been waiting for. Give the Wyoming voters the race that they deserve.
As I look at it, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but as I look at it, we've got, who knows how big it's going to be, but we've got data centers that are coming that are going to use, Dick and I were just talking about this, they want to use energy. What do we have? Bunches of energy, you know that better than anyone. And now we also have all of the jobs that kind of come with that. And they're high-paying, high-skilled jobs. They're the kinds of things that I've always talked about with coal. You know, high-paying, high-skilled jobs. Those are the things we want. We don't just want the stuff that's low-paying stuff. So, Dustin, I hope the legislature reorients itself, and as we have always done in the state, talks about the best days being ahead of us instead of we better batten down the hatches because we're sinking. Thanks. Yep. Hey, good to see you.
Zach with the Powell Tribune. So got a more specific question with in Park County we have the state shooting complex kind of coming up. I know they've got 10 million. They're looking for more, and they were promised more, but they're looking for a little bit more than they were promised. Do you support the shooting complex getting more money considering how many cuts they're talking about right now?
Well, yeah, let me put that in frame. First off, I supported the shooting complex to start with. I think it's great, and you know, I've learned a long time in my life that it's nice to have and need to have, and you know, I think there's a balance there that should be gone forward. So I'm not really excited about a lot more money going to the state shooting complex, especially when one of the decisions we're making is we're not going to do summer EBT. We're not going to do SNAP. We're not, you know, we're not going to feed our kids, but we're happy to be able to have a bigger, fancier, more expensive shooting complex. Those are priorities I think we need to get a little bit straighter. I hope all our kids learn how to shoot. That's a big thing for us. But at the same time, I hope they can also eat. And I think that's really key. Thanks. Yes, sir.
Just to ask a quick follow-up question for clarification. In your answer about Wyoming Public Media, you talked a lot about Wyoming PBS. And I think Wyoming Public Media has a different funding source from the university. And so I just wanted to clarify, are you also opposed to cuts to Wyoming Public Media, which is the radio station in NPR?
Well, and I addressed that to start with, but you know, you're right. The university covers NPR, Community College Commission covers PBS, but you know, having fought so hard to be able to get those repeaters out there, and last year, you know, it is now the core of our emergency response. And one of the things we heard during the fires in Campbell County and Weston County was we need to have better emergency response notifications. That's that system. And it needs to be upgraded. And if we're saying, well, we're not going to do that because, you know, we don't like it, that's shooting ourselves in the foot. So we've got that. In fact, here's one of the investors in the local repeater that was in Buffalo way back in the early 90s, because that's how important it is. So yeah, I support it 100%. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm not going to ask about the budget, I promise.
That's okay, yeah.
So the deadline for the Colorado River Agreement was February 14th. That's
Yeah.
coming up pretty quick here. Can you give us an update on that situation, where things kind of stand?
Yes. So obviously there's a bit of confusion between the upper and the lower basins, and a lot of concern about how that gets played out. We were supposed to be in DC in the Secretary's office in November. That didn't happen, and that was supposed to be actually coming up, I think, next week, but it's been delayed to the 30th. So we're going to be there again. In the meantime, we're working very hard to, between the upper basin states and making sure that we're able to talk with the lower basin states and also with the irrigation districts in California to try to craft a policy that's going to make sense. This is one of the just saying, it was one of the reasons I wanted to have the support I did in the state engineer's office and the attorney general's office, is because these are becoming much more complicated issues, and we really need to be well prepared to be able to deal with them. So that nothing is settled yet, but we'll be in touch. Thanks. It is that issue, water. Everybody in this room knows that, but it's not just the Colorado. It's the North Platte. It's the Snake River. These are all super important issues. And Wyoming punches well above our weight, but we punch with a very limited staff. And that's also true when we talk about the PSC, where, and Dick and I were just talking about this, the issues that the PSC wrangles with now have become much, much more complicated. And there are many more meetings you have to attend. And when you've got 3 commissioners and a limited staff, to make sure Wyoming's voice is heard, that's something that's really critical. More critical now than it has been If you don't believe me, talk about Dick, because we always fight in the PSC hearings anyway. So, but if we want to make sure that our ratepayers are protected and that we're not, somehow affected by somebody's decision in a faraway state like Oregon or California or Washington or something, we've got to make sure that our PSC is well-staffed and equipped to be able to deal with those issues. Yes?
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm with the News and Guide. I know this state has a shared stewardship agreement with the Forest Service and that your office is in talks to revise that agreement right now. Are you looking to take on more responsibility for federal forest lands? And if so, why or why not?
It depends on how you define responsibility. We want to be able to do a better job of managing them. But as I've said this over and over and over again, the decisions that the state makes have to be backed by the federal government. And so we need to have that shared stewardship agreement in place. And I think actually in a little bit I'll be talking with the Secretary of Ag and the Secretary of Interior about how important those issues are going to be. So yes, we do support it. We feel we have a better handle on how to manage. You look at the Black Hills Forest, for example, or down in the Medbo. And actually BT, we've had some pretty good experience in the BT as well. So, thank you. Yes, Jasmine.
Yeah, I had one last question to go back to the budget. You've talked a lot about, over the years, the separation of powers. And I think this year you've done a lot of advocating for certain spots in the budget and what you'd like to see come to fruition. But worst case scenario, all of these cuts are made and the legislature heads in the direction that is. What actions can the governor's office take when it's all said and done to help mitigate some of that hurt?
Well, that sort of depends on the situation and what the opportunities are there. The kinds of cuts that they're looking at here, some of them are going to be hard to address. I've for some time been talking about the university for that question, sort of saying we've got to step up our fundraising efforts. We've got to make sure, because if you really want to get out from under the thumb of the legislature, best way to do that is to break the golden rule. That is, making sure you have more gold than the other person does too. We'll look, and obviously the veto things and so on, and that is all subject to what goes on in the legislature and how they feel about it. I have a great deal of respect for our legislature, and I think Senator Dockstader would tell you that because he's been there through thick and thin, and I realize that sometimes I take my lumps, and I do feel that separation is key. That's what was so important in the success and the dynamism of our form of government. This is what's sort of unfortunate to me about what we see playing out now. I think you're going to see the Joint Appropriations Committee take laps about how they've cut $1 billion from the governor's budget. Well, they took out capital construction. That's a huge chunk. Doesn't mean we're not going to spend it. It just means it's not in the budget. And the same with the rural health transformation. That's going in a separate bill. So you can make these big cuts there. Now they have made some substantial cuts, but I've said this is a little bit like sitting down at the kitchen table and you've got the mortgage payment and you've got your household budget. That's a little bit like what we're talking about here. The mortgage payment's got to be paid and your other budget's here. But if you say you're going to wrap it all together and then cut these things out, but you're not cutting the spending, you're just moving it. That's sort of the gamesmanship that I think people in Wyoming aren't going to accept. I think it's far more important to do what you say you're going to do. And I think that, over the years I've demonstrated that. So we'll fight hard to make sure. I know that there's some places that we'll have disagreements. That's the way government works, and we'll do our best to make sure it continues to go forward. But at the end of the day, I always think of Haley Barbour and this wonderful comment. You can lead your legislature to water, Mark, but you can't make them think.
Okay, maybe just one more question.
I got two. Can I do two?
Okay, you can do two.
Thank you. Yeah.
Governor, as part of the 20-something students that are here from UW, do you have any advice for young professionals entering the workforce in the next couple of years? As well as, I would love to hear the story about your tie, as I really like.
So, yeah, this is the money cap tie. I thought it was appropriate for the budget. Doug Samuelson gave this tie to me. He was chair of the Joint Appropriations Committee, also seemed appropriate for today. Yeah, that's the story. Your advice for young professionals? Make this state worth your staying here. Be involved. And know that we're here to listen. If there are things that we can do that make this different. Wyoming, just look at the stable token. You know, we took a long time to get there, but now we've got all these people saying, wow, you guys have raised the professionalism across the whole industry. We really appreciate what Wyoming has done. No one else can do that. New York's been trying to do it. Georgia's been trying to do it. Nebraska's been trying to do it. But Wyoming got it done. And that's because you can get more things done here. We're more accessible and we're nimbler. So, thank you. Yep.
Yeah, in answering Jasmine's question, you talked about the Rural Health Transformation Program.
Yep.
And the JSC put that into its separate piece of legislation instead of the budget. And to me, that kind of signaled, they want to be able to secure those federal funds, but also it shows they don't want to risk something going wrong with the budget. And especially given what happened last year with the supplemental budget, I'm curious to you, does that signal any lack of confidence over what will happen over the next few weeks, or does that make anything to you?
Yeah, well, we put a lot of effort and work into the approach we took. People may have different ideas about it, but for the most part, it's been well thought through and well done. And that, my point with that was in the optics of we've cut the governor's budget, okay, but really what's important is what you're talking about. How that bill is going to be worked and the difference it can make and the work we need to do continuing forward. So my hope is that we continue to have the engagement across the health sector to be able to make sure that it is successful. I hope we don't try to, in fact, I think that's problematic. If we try to monkey with it too much, it risks being canceled. Not by us, but by the federal government. So, thank you. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. You guys, thank you for making the state a little bit better for the work that you do. I should say a lot better for the work that you do. It means the world to our citizens, and I just really say thanks. Right for the brand. Thanks.